Good morning, my friends. Let's begin with a prayer. Heavenly Father, Divine Mother, friend, beloved God, Jesus Christ, Babaji Krishna, Lahiri Mahashaya, Swami Sri Yukteswar, beloved Master Paramhansa Yogananda, saints of all religions, dearest friend Swami Kriyananda, humbly we bow to you all. Help us to live according to our inner guidance, and let that guidance come from our direct attunement with your presence. Help us not to be deceived by false ideas, by egoic longings, but rather to see through the confusion of this world to the simple clarity of your light. We are your children. Guide us and bless us. Om. Peace. Amen. For the past year or so, friends, I've been declaring Monday to be Money Day for obvious reasons. Also just because in a continuous way, I need to be able to remind you that our ability to carry on with the mission of the Masters, as I call the work I'm doing, depends these days on your support. And you've been just stellar in your commitment to helping us to put forward all that Swamiji taught me. Most of what we're doing is directly through me, but not all of it. We've started making some audio books of some of Swami's books that he didn't record himself, and we've invited a few others to whose voices or life experience is more appropriate for the title. Helen is working on the Education for Life book. She's been the director of our school here for 25 years. Keshava, who's a trained astrologer, has been reading Your Sun Sign as a Spiritual Guide. These audio books, I've read Crises in Modern Thought, and I'm halfway through Hope is a Better World. These projects will take a little time to see the light of day, though, because the editing of the recording takes many hours. We're just kind of getting that going. Italian version of Lightbearer will be out by Christmas, and maybe even the Spanish version. And I've been nibbling around the edges of maybe writing more from my notes of my years with Swami, which may require a period of seclusion, which would change some of the dynamic for a little while, but that would just be an interlude before more teaching and recording. And I'm able to think this freely and really just respond to opportunities as they come 100% because of your support. Some of you have systematized it by signing up through Patreon, which is a way of connecting people with resources to share with those who are doing creative work. Also, PayPal works really simple, either through my own name, Asha, or Mission of the Masters. So if it just crosses your mind in gratitude for anything that you've received through this work, do feel free to express that gratitude by making it possible for us to continue. So now we're on to the art of supportive leadership, working with people. And we are in the chapter about action. Let's see exactly what it's called. The need for action, not talk. This is such a fundamental aspect of the way Swami works. We are now. He's said these same thoughts, but he's going to say them again because he wants us to make sure that we don't miss it. People who devote too much time to discussing what they intend to do almost never end up actually doing it. I mean, Swami makes these unequivocal statements, and I've mentioned several times. When my first decade with Swami, I would rebel because he would issue these blanket statements. He said they aren't generalizations. He says he made a distinction. He said they aren't generalizations. What he's describing is the essence of an issue. So he's not generalizing that people talk, don't act, but he's saying people who devote too much time to discussing what they intend to do almost never end up actually doing it. And it's something to watch. You know, sometimes the most talkative and the most eloquent they're enamored. Well, I realize with a friend of mine, whom I love, they really like process. I like decisions. I like decisions and action. And it would always puzzle me that we would make a decision about what we were going to do. But my friend really just liked to talk about what we were going to do. And it was very vivid to me, how that just, once you know where you're going, you have to put force behind it. You can't just keep admiring the view and keep enjoying the feeling of creativity that comes from just talking to each other. Pay attention to it. I mean, these are just the little things that you pay attention to. And if you're wide awake and watching, you begin to know, is the only way I can put it. What was I thinking for a second there? Oh, the thought slipped away. I'll have to let it go until it comes back. In one case to which I was a witness, the planners were so eloquent about a project that many people became fired with their enthusiasm. I was not among them, however, Swami says. There had been too much talk, too many brochures, too many tours of the property for a project that didn't yet even exist. As things turned out, the project failed. How could things have turned out otherwise? The reasons for its failure were simply these: too many beautiful dreams and too little energy left over after the dreaming for constructive action. I was trying to reflect on this. Let me just, it's like, if you want to serve people, start doing it. If you want to help people, start helping them. Don't say, well, we're going to plan how we're going to help, we're going to plan how we're going to serve, we're going to figure out exactly the best way to serve, we're going to do surveys to find out what people need. If you have a desire to serve, you just start doing it. And talking about it and affirming it and researching it, it's not the same as just giving your energy in a way that will serve people. And when you begin to serve, and Swami says this in other ways, especially when you're doing a project that involves other people, you need people. It's a funny thing about communities, which is sort of, Swami would joke about this. When he was first starting Ananda, he couldn't start it by himself because it's a community. And a community, by definition, is not the life of a hermit. And so at the beginning, he had to involve a lot of people that ultimately did not turn out to be in tune with what Swami was trying to accomplish. But in order to get going, he had to get people involved. And in order to, even actually in a very real sense, to find out what was going to work, you can't just know what's going to work from doing surveys, asking people what they want, and then you have to get the energy going. When we were developing the community that we now live in here in Palo Alto and have lived here for 3 decades, it was at like 1988, 89. Ananda was just beginning to expand beyond the first community that Swami had founded in Nevada County, which is now Ananda Village. Even the idea of how we would make communities in urban areas was a bit unknown, was more than a bit unknown. We just didn't know how it was going to work. We'd had several large or small houses, shared ashram houses, in which devotees lived together. But it's a limited model. Only some people enjoy that kind of communal living. And it's very difficult for couples, and it's very hard on families because they don't they don't have the integrity of their own space to have their own relationships. So we were trying to go to a model that was beyond communal living in one house. Now, communal living in one house can be great fun, and it can be very beneficial to a lot of people, so I'm not against it in principle, but a lot of good people don't thrive in that environment. And as I said, for families and children, for married couples and children, it can be especially challenging. So Swami built Ananda Village on a different model, which is in individual houses. But once we're in an urban area, individual houses are very hard to acquire all in one place unless you have great wealth to draw upon. But apartment complexes are an ideal compromise. And after all these years, I still think in many ways they may be the ideal model. Our buildings are the construction is not ideal. So I would build the buildings more solidly and put more soundproofing. But when you have your own apartment, you can create your own space. You have your own kitchen, you can in your own living room, and you can create your own either solitude, hermit reality, or marriage reality, or family reality. But as soon as you step outside your door, you're in close proximity to all your friends. When you have separate houses with too much distance between them, especially when everybody drives their car right up to the door of their house, even though you can have neighbors, there's less opportunity for spontaneous interaction. So this is my opinion, that apartment complexes work really beautifully. So when we were going to start this community, there was a handful of us, maybe, I don't know how many, maybe 6, maybe 8, not more than that, who had lived in community, who were basically had moved to this area after having lived at Ananda Village, which was Ananda's only community. And we understood how communities worked. And we knew that the experience of it would be elevating and fun and so on like that. At the same time, 8 of us was not enough to make a community happen. So we had to have meetings, big meetings, and we had a Sangha already, because from 1981, when Swami purchased East West Bookshop in Menlo Park, people had moved to this area, and that's why we had a big house. Actually, by the time we were doing this, we had 3 separate houses, communal houses, that were fun and that were working well, but had the limitations that I was describing. But let me think. But there was just this core of people who were transplanted. But we had a Sangha because we had a lovely spiritual center. We had classes, we had Sunday services. We had put out energy to serve in the ways that were available to us, with the idea that we could build on it to do more. So we had this big meeting. I draw a circle with my hands because we sat in a big circle in the room that we had. Everybody who might be interested in community were going to come in and talk about it. And I'm not sure. I don't think we had any real objectives yet. We weren't trying to, there was no place yet to move into. It was just theoretical. So we started this meeting, and we were describing, people were doing a lot of brainstorming. We were trying to describe the energy of what we wanted, what we imagined would happen. We wrote things on the board, that kind of a meeting. And it was all going very positively. And then someone started expressing all their fears and anxieties about what might happen in community, that this would happen and that would happen. Now, those of us who lived in Ananda community, I'd lived 16 years in Ananda community, and I knew that these were just fears. And so they expressed their fears. Okay, we'll let that person express them. Then the next person picked up the wave of, the terrible things that might happen, and then they expressed all their fears and concerned about what was going to happen. And then you could sort of feel the tension. You know, we'd had this very positive energy. You could feel the tension. The third person got on, and he was talking about the fears and anxieties he had. And I just saw the whole room falling to pieces. And I said, interrupting him, I said, "Oh, look at that. It's time for lunch. Okay, lunch break." And we just called a lunch break because they all wanted to talk, but it wasn't going to take us anywhere. It was killing the creative force. And those of us who were in charge of the meeting, when we came back, we didn't have any more open discussion. we had controlled input, but it wasn't going to take us anywhere. It was too much discussion was taking the creative energy out of the room. It was taking the hope out of the room. It was taking the dynamic willpower out of the room. Now, the person I interrupted was furious with me, and in fact never forgave me, and drifted away. But honestly, it had to be done. The person would never have succeeded with us anyway, for a whole lot of other reasons. But don't be confused. You can't just say, well, this fear has to be addressed, that fear has to be addressed. No, a leader, and this is what our title is, leadership is action. Leadership communicates enough to get enough energy going that we can start taking action. And what simply happened is, we knew, the group of us who were really in charge, we knew that all of those fears, none of them would happen. We knew what we were doing. And they didn't. They were well-meaning. They weren't bad people. They just didn't know what they were doing. And leadership takes action when it sees that the energy requires it. And this is, let me finish with what Swami writes. The effective leader knows that an encyclopedia of good ideas is no substitute for even the least of those ideas put into actual practice. For in the last analysis, the essence of leadership is action, not discussion, no matter how intelligent or convincing the talk. Now, of course, this like all the principles that Swami puts forward, this has to be balanced. As it happens, the community that I've been part of all this time, probably because I've been part of it all this time, we're good communicators. Because to me it's very important. We need to be able to talk to each other. But I want to say, and it's probably true, I never let the when I'm present, I never let the communication just run wild. I don't, there are people who feel that you just let everybody talk and everybody puts all their feelings out on the table. I want people to feel that they can put all their feelings out on the table, but I think the leader has a responsibility to manage the energy. That you never just turn it over and see what will happen. And believe me, the group of people that I live with and have worked with for all these many years, this is a very, very capable group, and very practical and intelligent in their understanding. But somebody has to keep track of the energy and just keep moving the energy forward. You can have sessions where all you do is just talk, where everybody expresses their feelings if they want to. But Swamiji has trained us much more to pay attention to the magnetism, is the word that we want. So you want to be able to communicate. It's not like you keep things secret. There's another point of view that is often discussed in leadership. Well, people can't handle that. And Swami put it to us once, many years ago, the very first time that a large group of us, we went on a lecture tour. Swamiji was, this is when Swamiji ended up establishing our center in San Francisco, and he gave a very large program, very large because we rented this hall that held 1,000 people. And we had about 800. Maybe it was only 500 or 600, but it was a lot of people for us because we're a small movement. I mean, we're very dedicated to what we're doing, but we're not popular. But we're popular in our little tiny niche, but our niche is very tiny. So anyway, in order to help generate energy for that big program of Swamiji's, we organized 6 weeks of traveling around the Bay Area when different ones of us would give programs on different subjects. For some reason, I can't hold in my head how we made that work. But we had about 3 or 4 different teams, and each team would go out, and there would be, 3 or 4 speakers and support team. And it was a big adventure for us to move out of Ananda village. We did a lot of sharing with people, but people came to us. And it was actually a line in the sand after 10 years in the mountains. I mean, it's even how we put it. After 10 years in the mountains, developing ourselves and our way of life, we traveled down to the city to communicate it. So Swami was having a little team meeting and talking to us about what we were going to do and what proper attitudes and how we should work with it. A few of us had a little bit of experience. I had more than some, but no one had a lot of experience. And he was saying to always, just these words, always respect your audience. He said, you may know more about the particular subject that you're presenting, how to build a spiritual community, as an example, how to meditate, maybe even organic gardening, which was part of it, or how to spiritually minded child raising. We had a lot of specialized topics that we were, appropriately, we were expert in them because they were Master's teachings, and we had studied Master's teachings under Swami's mentorship, and we really did know. So he said, you have something to offer. You may know something that other people don't know, but they may be highly developed in fields about which you know nothing. So there has to be a strong feeling of mutual respect. You can't feel just because they're ignorant in the field that you're presenting that they're not people of deep learning or deep capability. I remember being in India, and as it happened, I was there. And the man I was talking to was a brain surgeon. And he was a lovely man, just sweet and humble. And he was approximately, and he was senior to me, I think, at that point. But in any case, he'd been a brain surgeon for a long time. He was a well-respected, well-established brain surgeon. And I saw him with, his hands folded in his lap, and I thought, my goodness, where those hands have been? Just completely incomprehensible to me. But he didn't know what I was talking about. He knew a field that I couldn't even imagine, but he didn't know what I was talking about. But he was a man of enormous accomplishment. I just happened to know who he was, but you never know who you're talking about. And there's also this sort of karmic reality of things, which is, why would I think that I have a better ability to handle subtleties or to deal with contradictions or to face into persecution, even than somebody who just arrived in the door? Because I don't know what their karma is. I don't know what they've already been through in their life. And it just has always seemed to me extremely important to keep those ideas in mind. However, so what I was saying about communication, I've never felt that it serves to hold back on communication. Oh, we can't say that, we can't say that. We have to keep this as a secret. When Ananda was in this terrible years of 12 years of litigation, which included just a horrible lawsuit accusing Swami Kriyananda and many of us in the community of being just perverse in every way that you can imagine. I had this little campaign that I ran that was called, Let Me Be the First to Tell You. Because I always thought it was better to say it out loud to someone than to be silent and then have them hear about it from somewhere else. Now, I don't sort of raise my hand to say, oh, by the way, we're in a lawsuit and we're just being accused of being morally despicable. I just thought you would want to know. But I've never hesitated whenever it was relevant to just bring it up in the easiest possible way. Because let me be the first to tell you, here I am, standing here with this. So I'm not suggesting that the leader controls the situation, but the leader needs to have enough awareness to be able to tell when conversation is increasing the dynamic potential and when it is just sucking the lifeblood out of it. And sometimes it's a matter of quantity. Sometimes it's a matter of who's gotten their hands on the microphone. So open mic is always, you have to always have some sort of way of controlling discussion. And see, I guess what I'm also saying, what Swami is saying here, some people think that talk itself, for its own sake, is beneficial. And I don't think so. I think talk and communication can be beneficial. But it just merely for everybody to be sharing words, if the wrong kind of words get spoken too much, all the creative potential of the situation goes away, and that's a shame. And people depend on you. The people who are working with you depend on you to make it happen. And they don't always know what they want. I was having a discussion with a friend about leading pilgrimage trips, actually, and the question of whether you give people the option as to whether to go or not. I said, they've never been there. They don't know what they're choosing. You know, you can't give people choices if they're not educated about their choices. And you can't give people choices when you know that the inclination they will have will actually not serve them. You have to find a way, you have to structure it in such a way that they will be allowed to rise to something more than they are. That's what was happening in that meeting about the community. All of a sudden, people started focusing on all their fears of what might happen. And there was no basis for those fears, because I and others in the room had years of experience in community and knew exactly how those potentials could easily be mitigated by the skills that Swami gave us. The most extreme example of this was Steve Jobs, who was somewhat dictatorial, apparently, in the way he ran his company. And when I was reading his biography, I so enjoyed it. They were talking about that he needed to do market research to find out what people wanted. He said, they don't know what they want because I haven't invented it yet. Just like that. I remember when we were working with a professional photographer and publicist from Los Angeles who came up and consulted with us. He was a devotee and a friend also. And one of the people in charge of publications at that point had been reading about how you, like if you put out a book, you have several covers, and you have focus groups, and the focus groups tell you which one they like. And this man, who was a professional in Hollywood, he said, why would you let other people decide who you're supposed to be? He said, what do they know about you? It was just like, it was so different than this sort of market style. He said, you decide who you are and what you have to give, and you create the image of what that is, and that's what you put forward to people. You don't turn such an important decision over to people who have no experience. So that's not always true in a corporation or so on. We've talked about listening, but there is a last sort of, I will keep track, the leader will keep track. And so he says, oops, I have to turn it right side up or else I can't read it. In every deliberation, there comes a point when the door to further discussion must be firmly closed, even if the subject has not been exhausted, even if it seems that the best possible solution has not yet been reached. The point is reached when discussion begins to block rather than liberate a group's creative flow. And this is the sentence that I did remember that I didn't find earlier that I love. At this point, almost any action short of utter lunacy will be better than no action at all. Okay, my friends, God bless you.